I know, says I gotta go, tired of going solo, but I'm never gonna go there again. This is what it is, this is who I am, this is where I finally take my stand. I didn't want to fall, but I don't have to crawl. I'm not the one with two star hands, giving him the best of everything that's left of the life inside this man. I've been born again.
This is, it would help if I hit the right button. Good morning, everyone. This is Eddie Huff, along with my partner in crime, David Van Risingham, as he likes to be called, David Van auf Deutsch, and out of Holland and Belgium. I always forget you're our neighbor to the south, Belgium, to be more Flemish. Yeah. And we have a special guest with us today that I will allow Dave to introduce a little later.
The pride of Custer County.
The pride of Custer County.
Oh, I thought you were okay.
But close to Custer County.
Yeah.
Custer County.
Yeah,
Custer.
Man of the red dirt.
Oh, man. Custer, okay. We haven't talked about, Dave, remind me, I do want to get one day and do a whole show on the Lakota. Lakota tribe. Speaking of Custer, one of my heroes is Crazy Horse.
Yeah.
My wife and I did a whole study on Crazy Horse. She read to me about Crazy Horse. Mm-hmm. And to me, I think the January 6th protesters are very much like Crazy Horse.
Yeah. Yep.
But that's for another time. Today,
all right.
Today, this is Fresh Black Coffee to wake you up. Oh, by the way, this is a question I need to ask once again. I think I asked it of you earlier. Why am I darker than you two? Is it the lighting?
I think it's the German in you.
It's the German. Okay. It's okay. I have a dark vibe. Yeah. I have a dark vibe about me, huh?
We are playing around with studio equipment here, and we'll get this right. I'm sorry.
Okay. So that's why I'm darker than you guys. Okay. It couldn't be anything else. Okay. I think I get it. All right. Hey, moving right along, everybody. Yeah. Dave, would you please introduce our special guest today?
A man I met, we were both serving on a sheriff's debate.
Yep.
And I was scared to death. Here is me, little old blogger, and I was called in with a couple of people coming out of the Tulsa World, their lead political guy, and Ziva Brandstatter. And I thought, oh my goodness, and you guys couldn't have been nicer to me. Randy Krehbiel, welcome to Fresh Black Coffee.
Thank you for asking me. I appreciate it very much.
I tell you, Eddie, I have so much respect for this man, not just him, but respect for the industry of being a professional news organization.
And which organization does he represent?
It's Tulsa World.
Tulsa World, the world.
I don't know if anybody else.
No.
He represents the Krehbiel House.
Mundial. The Krehbiel House, the House of Krehbiel.
You know what? There's a guy nationally that used to be on KRMG a lot, and Sean Hannity, Jesse Dupree.
Oh, yeah.
And the thing a lot of us bloggers would talk about is that guy was amazing because you could never tell if he had any kind of a bias. He was straight facts, And Randy, you're the closest person I know to that. Now, don't let it go to your head,
Right.
But you really do well. Other than the one time you called one of my blogger friends a gadfly, but he still likes you.
So, but I thought that was a good thing to call him a gadfly.
And you know what? You're right. This morning I pulled up the dictionary and I'm like, yeah, he's right. He's right. Because a gadfly, let's get into etymology, actually literally means a fly that bothers the cattle, right?
Yeah.
And irritates them. And in the figurative sense, Al Gerhardt was who I was talking to. He is an irritant. In fact, the Court of Criminal Appeals, literally in their decision, when they overturned his blackmail thing, they said, yes, he may be an irritant to the legislature. And you know what? He went out and got a vanity license plate says irritant. I'm not kidding you. He wears it like a badge of honor. But you're right. And that's part, and you told me later, you said, I don't consider that really an insult. Mm-hmm. It's just a way that some people get things done.
Yeah, he's an irritant to the people in charge.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what a gadfly is.
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
so,
true. And I agree with you. Gadflies or the human gadflies are people that tend to spark interest. I'll tell you who in current events, the gadfly of all gadflies today would be Elon Musk. I mean, he is irritating so many people, right? I mean, it's unbelievable, but you're right, Randy, that gadfly is not necessarily a negative connotation.
Yeah, but Randy, and I'll let you talk more about, where you're coming from, but, I spent a summer out there in Custer County, Corn, Oklahoma, on a wheat harvest and cattle farm, and good folk out there.
Yeah,
absolutely salt of the earth folk. And, they aren't as caught up in the political nuances that the big city people get into. They just know, treating people honorably, living right, and caring for your neighbor. Mm-hmm. And that's what I learned from the Mennonites out there.
Yeah. Well, and of course, the Mennonites have always been a little bit separate from the world. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of different categories of Mennonite. I grew up in a Mennonite family, and I used to joke about, the Mennonites, they would have a schism over, whether to have buttons on your clothes or hooks on your clothes, or how long the woman's hair had to be, or, just almost anything. They'd get in an argument and have a split over, but they, they're part of that, they sort of follow that, the verse about being, in the world, but not part of the world, So
moderation be known to all.
Yeah, that sort of thing.
Randy, you're also Cherokee background, correct?
Well, no, actually, I am not a tribal member, but my kids are.
Oh, your kid. Okay, so you're from your wife,
from their mother. Yeah, so they're Cherokee citizens, and they're pretty serious about it. Especially my daughter. So. But I've always had a real interest in Indians, and especially living in this part of the country and this part of the state. It's all around you, and if you're not paying attention to it, you're missing something.
So what is Krehbiel? What is that? Is that German? Or
that is German. I mean, what I was told was that it's Swiss German, that they, originated in Switzerland and went to Germany, and then they came over here at some point.
Man, I'm sorry that we're limited to just an hour and a half, because I'm ready to go all off into your genealogy and go off into but to find out, in Switzerland, how your family ended up here. I don't know if any of you watched that show 1883. The Yellowstone. It's like that 1883. It's really a phenomenal show. It's really good. I mean, it's really, if you haven't seen it, it's very good. But anyway, it's about them taking these German immigrants and they're taking them they want to go to Oregon. But they're having trouble getting out of Texas, crossing the Red River and into Kansas and Colorado. And, I think they've made it to Colorado by the end of the season here. So, but it's pretty interesting. But anyway, like I said, it's interesting to hear people's background, because it's very important. I think we don't spend enough time really finding out what people's backgrounds are to show the true nature of the melting pot of America. And it does affect us to some extent, but it also shows how far we've come to show the oneness we have also become as Americans and as Oklahomans. Yeah. I'm half German. I'm half African American. I call it black, but part of my people came from Africa, West Africa, and to be more exact, and even in Germany, my German part is French and Eastern European and all this, I'm a true mutt, I guess you would say, but to think that I am now American, I'm about as American as you can get. You have come from a Germanic background, let's say. He's from a Belgian, Dutch, Belgian, Flemish, if you will, background. And yet we're all sitting here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. You've married a Native American descendant with children with that background. And, you know, and you say your children really like to identify as Native Americans. I really hope that they don't lose or want to lose that European background either, because that's such a rich, if they really study the richness of that background too, it's very important.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't want to speak for them, but it's just, you know, it's part of who they are.
Right.
And my son actually, so my son is a political science professor in West Virginia, and his specialty actually is what they call comparative politics, and he actually studies European politics more than anything. So I mean, but that's just, I know what you're saying, and I think it's true. You know, I watched the Finding Your Roots program on OETA a lot, and to me, it's just always so interesting how people, the circumstances that land you where you are, you know, and how you got there, and also just, you know, respect for the people who came before you and what they did to get there. And also you think about, for a lot of, a lot of the Europeans that came to the United States, one of the things that the time I went to Ellis Island one time, and then I know something about, you know, as you read history and stuff, and you think, how bad was it for him to want to come over here? Because it was not an easy trip. And up until, you know, the probably the, you know, 19 teens or something like that, if you came to the United States, whether you came willingly or unwillingly, like, you know, some of your ancestors would have, the chances are you were never going to see the place you came from again, and you were never going to see the people you left behind again.
Yeah.
So it was a very hard thing, and you know, I think you can overthink things sometimes, but just the things, people are people, and you know, they were just trying to, I think they were trying to find a better place. Yeah. Most of them.
Yeah, I mean, it tells you somewhat how great the promise of America was, that it would compel them against all of those concerns that are so legitimate that you bring up. Yeah. But I wanted people first, before we get into why we're here today, to get to know Randy a little bit and why I am so impressed with this man. And it also helps me to understand that, you know, as much as folks with some of my political movement, the religious right, and then the Tea Party and that, you know, we kind of beat up on the legacy media, if you will, but there's a lot of good people still in it, and I just want people to know I stand by Randy.
No, that's good. No, I agree. I've read his stuff for years, and I've had my issues with where he works and what he writes. Some of the people we've talked about even beforehand. But I've never had an issue with his stuff. And like you said, journalism is supposed to be down. It's supposed to give us the news. It's supposed to inform us, right? Yeah. Inform us and so forth. And I don't even mind opinions. I really do respect people that let us know up front that this is my opinion. And here's my opinion, and I can respect it. I can argue with it, and I like people. In fact, Randy, I have to tell you how we met. We argued about Donald Trump. Yep. In 2016. Yep. And 15 actually is when it began.
Yeah, it was the day he came to Mabee Center.
Yeah, remember that? Oh yeah, I was there.
That's how we met. He was there.
And we were at home arguing on Facebook.
Yeah, We were, the ORU Stadium. Yeah. But anyway,
20,000 people.
Yeah, with 20,000 people in the ORU Stadium. But anyway, and he and I were going and it must have lasted months, I guess, that we were arguing about everything. But what drew my respect is he didn't get upset at me being a Trump supporter, and I didn't get upset with him being a Trump detractor.
At that time. Yeah.
At that time, right. But I respect it. And I understood, see, and the reason was I understood what his objections were. I was able to understand his objections and why. And he was able to allow me to have my opinion. And this is what I think made America great. I think this is how the founding fathers were. That Jefferson and Franklin, for example, didn't exactly see eye to eye. George Washington and Hamilton may not have seen eye to eye. And we know that Adams and Jefferson didn't see eye to eye. So, but yet these are the guys that ended up being presidents right behind each other. Yeah. And the nation.
And they both collaborated on the Declaration of Independence.
Exactly.
That's how they started.
Right. And the Constitution later and all of these things. So this is what made America great. And we'll get into some other stuff later. But right now, the issue at hand and the reason that Randy is here and that he is an expert in and why Dave has invited you here, Randy, is to discuss an election coming up here within just weeks. So, Dave, I will turn it over to you and Randy.
Yeah. Randy, I read your article this morning.
Oh, by the way, Randy, that's a condenser mic, so you don't have to get as close as it'll pick you up. Okay, I've got you.
Yeah. Read your article this morning. I had the same take as you. This was not a big turnout. This was not a showdown,
Well, it certainly wasn't 2018. I mean, that's what just to give a little background, whenever they look at, compare election cycles, you have to do it on 4-year, because in Oklahoma, in gubernatorial years, you have different sets of candidates up. You not only don't have the president on the ballot, you have most of the statewide offices, and you have all the judges and the district attorneys. So the number of filings are usually greater, more in the gubernatorial years than they are in the presidential years. Because in the presidential years, you're usually mainly just voting on the president and legislative races. So, yeah, I mean, the numbers, interestingly enough, they don't really have numbers going back before 2000. That's as far back as they go as far as, maintaining the records. But so in the gubernatorial year, it's the fewest number of filings.
Yeah. Now, what I wrote in my article this morning, yesterday was the biggest watch party, if you will, because 54 lawmakers got reelected yesterday out of 125 that were up, because, half the Senate is in the middle of their term. So, and then I looked at a bunch are going to be settled at the primary because only one party filed. Only 42 seats will be decided in November.
Right.
54 were decided this week. That just blows my mind.
Yeah, I think that surprises a lot of people. And I've kind of, for many years have preached the idea that the most important election in Oklahoma, the most important election day, is the day of the Republican primary, because that's pretty much when things, even in terms of the general election, a lot of those elections that are going to be in November are to a large extent settled in the Republican primary, because that determines who the Republican candidate is and whether or not the Democrat is going to, have a chance in a lot of those races. Now, we do have a few districts where it's a little bit the other way, but those are almost all gone.
Yeah, but that's a complete flip, because back in our college days, in our 20s, it was the opposite. It was all Democrat. In fact, Bob Anthony he was the very first, and he's still on the corporation commission. He was the first Republican to get on it. And he said the Oklahoma Republican Party really had to work to find people willing to sacrifice themselves on that, and Bob ends up winning.
Yeah, right. No, it's and that is part of, I think it's even more so now difficult to find candidates and recruit candidates, because well, first of all, who wants to be in elected office in Oklahoma, anywhere, the way things are now. But in the case of the legislature, since we're talking about that, it takes a lot of time. People think it's like a 4 months out of the year. But really, if you do it right, it's a full-time job.
It is.
But it doesn't, for a lot of people, it doesn't pay what they're used to making it a full-time job.
Yeah, let's segue into that. There's some notable names didn't show up to run again. Sheila Dills. James Leewright.
Right.
Those are just to name a couple. Do you have any others you want to name?
Well, so, there's another state senator, Zach Taylor. He didn't come back. There's a couple of Democrats. Colin Walkie in Oklahoma City is not coming back.
Denise Brewer here in Tulsa.
Denise Brewer is not coming back. I think there might have been one or two other, and they're just kind of slipping. But, I think a lot of people get into it and they find out it's not what they thought it would be, or they get into it. I think the biggest thing is they get into it and find out it's a lot more time than they were led to believe it was going to be. And if you don't have the kind of occupation or financial situation, I mean, I don't have any data on this, so I could be wrong. I could very easily be wrong, but it just sort of seems to me that, especially once we started with term limits, that because you knew it was something that you were not going to be there forever, you started getting a lot of either people who are really young, like just out of college, and they don't have a lot of responsibilities and they've got a lot of energy, and so they get into it. Or you get people that are a lot further advanced in their careers. Yeah. And so they either they've built up a financial base, or we have a lot of real estate agents in the legislature because they don't have fixed hours.
Right. Some retirees.
We have a lot of people who are retired from education, or they're retired from law enforcement, or something like that. I mean, we have quite a few
military veterans.
So we get a fair amount of people who have some kind of a situation. Some of them, a few of them own their own businesses, but they're large enough that they can kind of work around it.
I know one very bright young woman that in the last year, she expressed interest. She and her husband, I know them, their kids, but they got 3 young grade school kids. Yeah. And I just said, I don't think I would do it now, because you and I know of families that have broken up over this. Yes. It is a strain on families. And guys like Eric Proctor, Eric. Eric he tried to limit maybe 3 nights he stayed over each week, and he was home with his family. It's almost like a truck driver job.
Right. Yeah, and it's a little bit different probably if you live in the Oklahoma City area than if you live outside the area.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you're there's a state senator from Felt, which is absolutely as far west in Oklahoma. It is at the far end of the panhandle.
Murdoch. He said he lives closer to the New Mexico capital than the Oklahoma
I think his career was working for the state of New Mexico. So for those folks, it's a hike. Or if you're the state representative from McCurtain County, that's a hike. I mean, so I mean, I think it also, I think the state parties don't have the resources they once did, and by resources I largely mean just the sort of the leverage or the influence. They don't have jobs to pass out. They don't, but they can offer some organization, and we kind of go through cycles on both the Republican and Democrats, but it helps if you have somebody in the state party, the chairman or somebody they designate, who can go out and recruit candidates.
And let's tell you broke a story. I sat on it this week. I knew John Bennett was, I'd heard he was resigning. You got a confirmation, I assume, from Shane Jemison, the vice chair, and that we could expect in a formal announcement he's resigning because he's running for Congress.
Right.
And so, I think that, I will say this. I think the Republican Party right now at the state level is the biggest mess I've ever seen. It really is.
It's a struggle, and I think in terms. So a consultant one time told me this, and I think it basically a campaign manager, and I think there's a lot to say for it, which is that you have to recruit candidates who fit their district, and not necessarily one. I think there's a tension there where some people want to recruit candidates that all follow a litmus
test, right?
Right. A rigid set of but if it's up to the consultants who are getting paid to do this, and they get paid more if they win, they want somebody who's going to win the district and keep winning that district.
And I and several layers, our national committee man, Steve Curry, and I talked about, agree with you. These decisions should not be made at a state level. And there have been people in the party grassroots, and I've been in the trenches at the conventions where they're trying to pass such a litmus test, that they got to agree with 80% of our platform, things like that. And I'll take half a loaf if that's all I can get. I live in a Democrat district who's been represented by a Democrat last 4 years. You know what? I'll take half a loaf because right now I'm not getting any. I'm getting a lawmaker who isn't even showing up at the Capitol right now, Thankfully, the resignation has happened, or not seeking another term, and we'll get some good representation there. So I agree with you, and I think there's a lot of people saying the party's not even relevant anymore.
I think, one of the things that's changed, and I think a lot of it has to do with campaign financing, is that, the parties used to run everything. The parties chose the candidates, and that's changed over, 125 years beginning. I'm not saying this was a bad idea, but when they went from conventions and things like that, even for state and local candidates to primaries, well, that shifted the power. And I would say now that most of the power is with candidates in special interest groups.
Yes.
Speaking broadly, when you're talking about special interest groups, I mean, I'm not just talking about, the Chamber of Commerce or
any trade association.
Well, any trade association, but beyond that, you have things like the Heritage Foundation or what's the
NRA. Pro-life. I mean, there's a lot of them.
Yeah, well, and there's some on the other side too. There's the New American Century is one that's on the left. I think it's called, or something like that. And so and because of the finance laws now, where you have all the dark money and all of that stuff, and you can spend about whatever you want to, and you don't have to reveal your donors.
Yeah. Okay. So let's segue into this whole narrative of George Soros. Now, it's been said that he's been trying to go after DA's races and things like that. And there's a lot of, things. In fact, there's some pretty solid evidence in some places. What we saw 4 years ago here in Oklahoma were a lot of candidates running for DA. And you and I both did a count, at least 20 of the 27 DAs. I count 22.
Okay.
That was challenged.
I was really tired when I counted that, so I might have been.
You put in a marathon day. Now, I stayed home. You were beating it at the Capitol.
No, but it is a lot.
Almost all the judges unopposed. Over 80% of the DAs unopposed. If George Soros was giving money, he certainly isn't this year to bring leftists into it.
Yeah, right. Well, for one, first of all these things go in cycles. And in 2012, or I can remember when we had a cycle where there were a lot of open seats. Now on the, we went through the sentencing reform and the criminal justice reform cycle, and now we're kind of trying to sort that out, and so maybe that's part of it. I also think people are just kind of tired. And I saw a national poll that talked about people are just not that interested in this year's elections. They're just worn out, which I think is understandable. I mean, if you think about COVID and everything that's gone on for the last, you name it. I mean, really, you could go back 10 years.
There's three theories. They're tired is one. They're content. or they don't feel like they have a voice and can make a change.
Yeah.
It could be any of those three.
It could be any of those. I don't think there are that many people who are content right now. I could be wrong about that, but I mean, we still see a lot of, butting heads, and, but I could be wrong. I just think that at some point people, politics operates a lot on fear and anger.
It does.
And fear and anger burns up a lot of adrenaline. Yeah. And after a while, you just kind of have to sit back and, rest a minute.
Now, there is one DA's race that's getting a lot of heat, and that's the Oklahoma City area.
Right.
The most powerful DA.
Correct.
Because he has jurisdiction over any statewide official. If you're going to take down the governor, it's that DA has the power to. So, couple of Democrats, 4 or 5 Republicans.
Yeah, I was trying to remember. I want to say there's either... I'm not sure. I think there are 2 Democrats and 3 or 4 Republicans.
I think I have 4 on here.
Okay.
Yep. And so Kevin Calvi is probably one of the most notable.
Yeah.
Former lawmaker, military veteran, and now county commissioner over there. He's running. A Democrat has had that seat for long. David Pruitt.
David
Pruitt is, when you said fear, that's what else went down this rabbit trail, because he was feared. Last time around, nobody challenged him. I don't think it's because people were content. I think there are a lot of attorneys who were scared of the guy.
I don't know as much about Oklahoma County politics, but of course David Pruitt is really, as you mentioned, is kind of that position is kind of has statewide implications for the very reason that you mentioned. And, there's a lot of stuff going on and there's always a lot of stuff going on in state government, I guess. But
right now he's going after the Speaker Pro Temp. Or had been. He resigned. Terry O'Donnell from the Tulsa area.
Yeah, Terry O'Donnell. And I don't know. I think they may be having a grand jury on the tourism department and the contracts with the, over the renovation of the lodges and the restaurants at some of the state parks.
Yeah, I saw that.
And that's a deal that I don't. The only thing I know is that this one restaurant company wound up getting paid 4 times what they originally contracted for, but the job wound up being a lot bigger than they expected it to be. So I don't know.
Now I understand it. So now that would put Pinnell in some spotlight.
Yeah, that potentially is a problem for Matt. And, he got opponents. Now, one of the things that's kind of interesting is that just kind of as a sidelight, especially on the statewide offices, you'll notice that the Libertarians fielded a candidate in almost every statewide office, and they made a concerted effort to do that so they can stay on the ballot. They figure, and they went after offices. I think there is a Libertarian running for governor, but what they're really interested in is like lieutenant governor and labor commissioner and some of those others, because they think they got a better chance of getting, I think it's 2.5% to stay on the ballot.
Yes. In fact, what's his name? Chris Powell is running. Chris, their first year, because no Democrat ran, all the Democrats voted for the Libertarian because they weren't going to vote for the Republican.
Right.
And that gave them that. And this Todd, I think it's Hagedorn, I forget it's kind of hard name to spell, but he actually eclipsed that because he ran for a seat where, auditor, where the Democrats didn't put auditor in.
Did he? Well, there was a guy from Bixby that ran for, I want to say, Corporation Commission.
Yeah, I think that's him.
Okay,
yeah. But anyway, so, yeah, they've got their own thing. Now, the legislature has dropped it. It used to be a much higher threshold.
Correct.
And, so. Anyway.
Hey, I wanted to jump back a little bit, as Ms. Psaki would say, circle back, but and discuss the dark money situation. I think the world had discussed this. I know some of the TV channels had discussed the dark money, particularly those that are opposed to Governor Stitt. You've probably seen the ads, the dark money. what is your opinion on some of these and what's going on with that? Because I know one of them, we had talked about it the last couple of weeks. One of them has got $10 million, raised $10 million alone, just this one group to oppose the governor. It's unbelievable.
Yes, it is, and it's hard, and it's very hard to find out who those are. And so I would say, not just in that situation, I would say in general, I feel like the people have a right to know who's paying for advertising, because in a sense they're paying for the campaigns of either the person they're supporting or the other side. I just think, I don't think it's really possible to try and control money going into politics.
Right.
But I think we can do a better job of telling people where the money comes from. And I know people say, well, that's a violation of free speech and all that stuff. I'm not a constitutional scholar. I just think it's right for people to know where the money's coming from.
I agree. I agree totally with you that on everything, actually. I think that we should not limit what people want to give or whatever, but we should know who's giving it. Mm-hmm. That I agree totally on that count right there. That people should be able to give to whomever they want to and how they want to give. But we should also be able to know who that money is tied to so that we can know the motives behind it. For example, in the case of this anti-Stitt money, to be able to know, are they truly Republicans, as they say, or conservatives, or is it the Democrats trying to sneak it in?
No, I agree. I agree. Again, because, in many cases, the party labels are just that. It's sort of like a team uniform. And the fight is really over, who's making the decisions, right, who's deciding who gets what, who makes the rules, who names the buildings. I mean, all of that stuff. That's what the fighting is over.
Let me ask you this, Randy, because I'm sure your newsroom has at least done some speculative looking into this, because it is more money this time than I think we've ever seen. Is there anybody we can rule out? Is there anybody who's come forward and say, because I'll just throw it. A lot of people are saying that's really the tribes. They're furious with Stitt and they want to take him down.
Well, I don't think it is all the tribes. I mean, they may be, and as I understand it, there's two different groups, but I don't,
there's actually three now. There's three. There's three that we identified last week.
Yeah, there's more than that. And so some of it might be them, but I don't think it's all them. And I don't, now I could be wrong.
Well, you will agree the tribes are not happy with Stitt.
Oh no, well I mean that's not a secret.
Yeah.
Right. I mean that's not a secret, and he's not happy with them. So I mean that's but again that comes back to that's a matter of who makes the decisions,
right?
Who decides who gets which money.
Okay. I've seen twice when the tribes have really gotten involved in the governor's office. They wanted bingo, 1990. Mm-hmm. My God, they got David Walters in. And some of it was corrupt money, right? Because David.
Yeah, but I don't know that it was from the tribes, but yeah.
Right, but they did put a lot of money in the race. I'm not saying it was all corrupt. I'm not making that allegation. And then they wanted bingo. That was 1990. 2002, they wanted full-out casinos. They got Brad Henry in.
They got Brad Henry, yeah.
And Brad barely took second in the primary to Vince Orsa. But by God, in the runoff, he was the man. And then he beats Largent, with a little hat tip to Gary Richardson, right? When they want something, they'll invest in politics.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Otherwise, I haven't seen them really get that involved.
I think so. Well, historically, the Indian tribes have sort of taken the stance that they would just as soon not get involved in the white man's stuff. I mean, I'm being a little bit old-fashioned there, but if you go way back, I mean, the Civil War tore Oklahoma apart over reasons that had nothing to do with the Civil War. Mm-hmm. But the tribe started out, their position was, let's not get involved in their fight. Let's just stay over here, and we want to be neutral. Well, they weren't allowed to be neutral, and they've always kind of, I think, taken that. Now, of course, lately, economies and everything become more complicated and entwined, and they're involved in a lot of business, that has changed. I want to be clear, that has changed. But you're right. I would agree with you in general. They also hedge their bets. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you look through, they tend, as a group, if they give money, lots of times they give to individuals. They give to individuals. They don't give to parties.
Yeah. I've heard Charles McCall has a very good working relationship with the Chickasaws.
I'm sure he does.
Yeah. And, so anyway, I just was trying to throw out, is there anyone else you could imagine?
I have one, teachers unions.
Mm.
That's a possibility. Again, I don't know. And so here's another thing though. There are some groups that are really opposed to some of the criminal justice reform stuff. I mean, they're really opposed to it. And I don't know that they're necessarily, because, criminal justice reform is something that conservatives and conservatives and liberals both worked on.
Yeah. It was a legislative bill that actually started out being straight up statutory. Stitt asked, no, I would like to have the Pardon Parole Board take part in this process and exercise some maybe subjective role in this and approving it, because he's saying, hey, look, these guys have been watching over them the last 10, 20 years. So Stitt kind of got what he asked for in a sense. When he had the bill changed, they gave him a little bit of latitude to decree the pardon, because the original bill was just going to make it statutory.
So to get back to get back to your original question, I think all the groups that have been mentioned here are possibilities, but I can't say that I know with any great certainty on any of them.
Yeah.
And I think each of the groups are taking somewhat different approaches to it. That's why
I asked it in the opposite. I said, is there any that we can rule out?
You can rule me out.
Well, yeah. Well, it's pretty clear to me that the $10 million
that's a lot of money.
Would have to come from one group that has the $10 million to throw out there to try to overturn the governor.
And I don't see criminal justice as being the kind of thing that causes somebody to throw $10 million.
Exactly.
Right. That's a good
right.
point. But then the question is, okay, if you're trying to defeat Kevin Stitt, who are you hoping to take his place? Because I'm not sure. Do they really want,
Hoffmeister.
Well,
you're talking about on the Republican side.
On the Republican side, are they really, does Mark Sherwood have $10 million behind him? I don't think so.
No.
Yeah.
I don't know. Here's the thing. I don't think that anybody that I've seen of the Republican candidates is going to take Stitt out. I don't see anybody strong enough. So. No. But what I think is going to happen or is the attempt is to diminish him so that when he does face Hoffmeister, which is.
And it could be somebody playing an even longer game. And by that I mean they see Kevin Stitt as a potential threat, if you will, for the long term. And so let's discredit him now. That's just me thinking. I have no idea who that would be or what.
Yeah. So here's what happened to me over the last few weeks. I've had a number of people call me saying, I'm thinking about this race. And they would just ask me, and I'm thinking of one. I'm not going to put a name there. But I said, okay, if you're running against this incumbent, here are his weaknesses. And here's the message that would have traction. But those weren't the motivations for that candidate to run. He's just going to latch on, or she, because that's a message that'll get traction.
Right.
So it could be that the motivation for taking out Stitt isn't really because of criminal justice, but it's the convenience.
Oh, no. I see what you're saying, and I think that's, and clearly, that one case that they keep highlighting, that was certainly terrible, and I think they need to look into that further, because you probably know more about this than I do, but my understanding is that there are some questions about why that particular person was let out. But here's the thing is, if you let 500 people out of prison, and 499 of them go absolutely straight, and you never have a problem with another one, and one of them is that guy,
right?
All the public remembers is that guy,
Yeah.
Right.
and so that's the problem, that whether you're the governor or an attorney general or a district attorney. That's the thing you run into, and that's why I think you see district attorneys, they talk about sentencing reform and criminal justice reform, but they don't want to be the guy who let
that
guy out.
Yeah, but some of it, I say, I don't think we're the most evil people in America, but yet our incarceration rate is amongst the highest. So does that mean that our sentencings... Remember the Keating days and Drew Edmondson days? It was all about get tough on crime, as though these big sentences was going to change us into choir boys. And my point on that, especially our women's incarceration.
Yeah, it was bad. It was bad. What was her name? Spotted Crow. You remember?
Yeah, it's just one of them. So, I think to some degree you have to say, well, let's use the example you and I both know, Rick Brinkley. Rick embezzled, $1.8 million.
I don't remember the figure, but it was a lot.
From the Tulsa Better Business Bureau that he was running because of a gambling addiction. Rick ran to federal court to plea. And because if he had been prosecuted in state court, he'd still be in prison.
Oh, yeah.
Because our state criminal statutes for the same crime are much tougher than the federal.
Yeah. No, and I want to be clear. I'm not arguing against sentencing reform or criminal justice reform, because I think it's hard to argue that we aren't putting enough people in jail. I mean, we are. And I think there's a lot of discrepancies in the way. I mean, so I'm not a lawyer. And I'm not an expert on these cases, and I hope I'm not going too far off base here, but take the case of Richard Glossop. Now, that guy may be as guilty as can be, but everybody agrees he did not actually kill that motel manager. Another guy killed the motel manager. The argument is whether Richard Glossop hired him or convinced him to do it. So the guy that actually killed someone is not getting the death penalty, and the guy who everyone agrees did not kill someone is getting the death penalty. Now, that's an extreme case, but I don't understand that. That to me doesn't seem right. But you go beyond that, and we put people in prison for, years and years, or get a felony on their record, and they can't get a job for stealing.
And Oklahoma, you get the best justice you can afford, right?
Right.
And you probably go back to the 90s with me when Sarah Howe, Bob and Howe's daughter, they put her on trial after convicting her boyfriend. He's getting several years. Well, Aubin and Bob have some money, so they hire Clark Brewster. She gets off. Yeah. It's one of those things that could be part of the Glossop deal. Yeah,
well, there's a lot of examples of exactly what you said.
Oh, yeah. John Tanner, what was his name? The innocent man.
Before we get too off into cases that people don't know anything about.
Sorry.
And,
right. No,
people start click.
Right.
I want to get back to some of these candidates. One in particular that just popped up yesterday. Scott Pruitt is back in the mix. He decided he's going to throw his hat in the ring for Senate. In that Senate, it's funny that everybody decides they want to run for that one district, instead of running against
James Langford.
James Langford, exactly. Yeah. And it's funny. Why do you suppose? Let me ask you, Randy. Why do you suppose nobody wants to run against James Langford other than Lohmeyer?
Well, there actually are 10 people running against Langford.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's 10.
They rolled in. Yes.
Yeah, they rolled in.
Well,
so, but you're right. It's more of a scramble for the Inhofe.
At least the notables. The notables
are
all running.
The most notable candidates, I would say, are on the Inhofe. What's going to be the former Inhofe seat,
right.
and it's one, there's no incumbent, so the name recognition thing is leveled out. And two, James Langford has $2.8 million in the bank. So.
Right. Now.
A mere paltry $2 million compared to the $10 million against the governor.
But all of those other people, nobody else running for Senate, with the exception of Mark Wayne Mullen, has anywhere close to that. And the only reason Mark Wayne has that much is because he put $1 million of his own money in it.
Yeah.
So that's, those are the two big reasons.
Yeah. In fact, Jameson Fott and I talked this morning, his, Muskogee Political, he published a bunch of the financial disclosures this morning. Yeah. So I'm going to be looking through that. Yeah, and I agree with you. Now, Darren Gantz, good friend of this program, and I think you know him as a good finance guy in politics. He says $5 million is what you need to be competitive in that open Senate seat.
That sounds right. You know, Stitt spent $10 million on the governor's race, and they're both statewide races, and of course in his case, he needed that money because nobody knew who he was when he started. He needed a bunch of money just so people knew the name. And so that Senate race is, there are names in there. There's Pruitt and Mark Wayne Mullen and T.W. Shannon. Nathan to a certain extent. And even Kendra Horn, on the Democrat side. Now, she's not going to have to campaign. It's kind of a weird deal with her, in that she didn't get a primary opponent, which means she can't raise as much money. The limit is so much for each election. So if you don't have a primary, you only raise money for one election. Oh. Yeah. All of those Republicans can raise three times the limit. She can only raise one time the limit.
Yeah, she would have been better off.
She would have been better.
She talked somebody into running.
Yes, exactly.
In the primary. Because most of her money, I can guarantee, is going to come from outside the state.
Well, so far, it's 90% from her old district.
So far, yeah.
So far. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. She doesn't have to ramp up. The good news for her, she doesn't have to ramp up as quickly as the Republicans do.
Well, and dark money again.
And dark money again
she can get.
But here's the thing about the money period. Once the Republican field, probably after the primary, then we'll have a better, I don't think she has much of a chance. I don't think she really thinks she has much of a chance. She's just out there. The job of the minority party is to make the majority party justify itself and explain itself.
That's true.
So I think she's mainly there to just, poke at him and say, well, how can you say this? Or how can you say that? Or, those two things you're saying don't add up. And that's just a job. It was the job of the Republicans when the Democrats were in the majority, and it's a job.
Yeah, and fair nose, Ray, we're going to ask you to come back here right after the primary, or we could take a look at what just happened.
Yeah.
Well, and I was going to say too, though, I think a lot of the national money has probably realized that you don't want to give money to Oklahoma because you might as well just throw your money down the toilet.
That was the direction I was going, and I didn't get there. Is that we'll see in June. I'm not sure she will get a lot of national money, but she actually didn't get a lot of national money when she ran the first time.
Really?
She did at the end.
Yes,
she did at the end, and she did for re-election. But people just didn't think there was any chance somebody, a Democrat could win, and so, if it's her and well, I'm not going to say.
You know what her mistake was? Her mistake was not doing what the Democrat in the senator from Arizona, what is her name?
Kristen Sinema.
Yeah, Kristen Sinema. Kristen Sinema remembered what state she's in. So she is a Democrat and she votes with the Democrats generally. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to those really hot button Republican issue or conservative issues, let's say that the people of her state find really important, she went the way that conservatives go and Arizonans go. And that's where Kendra, there were a couple of things she did that were just crazy that no Oklahoman would agree with. And I think that's what got her out of there.
I think one of the things that we in Tulsa have to grapple with is that Oklahoma City has changed an awful lot in the last 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
And it's become a lot more It's
Progressive.
well. What I was thinking was more like cosmopolitan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just more of a mix. I mean, I may have mentioned this to you when she was first elected. I thought, it would make a great. I say great. I think it would make an interesting master's thesis or something on how with the sort of the working title, how the Oklahoma City Thunder explained Kendra Horn. Because I think the Oklahoma City, now I don't know if they're a cause or effect, but when you get a major league sports franchise in like that, it either reflects or changes the mindset of the community. And basketball, especially because you got these people coming in from all over. I mean, they had the Turkish guy who came in who was a Muslim, and they, and it was at the height of some of these he talked about how the people of Oklahoma were so welcoming and everything, and which I think is true. I mean, but I don't know that. So Oklahoma City is now. I think Oklahoma City is now the number 28 metro area in terms of population. So it's just a different place. It's just a lot more different kinds of people.
Is Norman in that district?
No,
Just south.
Yeah, no, and of course the new 5th district is quite a bit different than the district that she won. The new 5th district, they took out a lot of the Democrat areas and gave them to Frank Lucas.
It's basically El Reno North now, middle of downtown.
Yeah.
North.
So the first time she won, Norman wasn't in the district.
Well, it's never been in the district.
It's never been. Okay.
It's
because
never been
I
in the
know
district.
that Norman is about as liberal as that area is.
South Oklahoma County is very working class, very Democrat, and that's where a lot of those votes. I mean, you look in the legislature, most of those are Democrat seats unopposed this time.
Yeah, I think, I think if you would look at her voting record in Congress, she was probably one of the most moderate or conservative, everything's relative, but she was probably further to the right on her voting record than just about any. But now it varies. Of course, it's like every member. It depends on the issue, but she was particularly critical, has been particularly critical of the Democrats for some of their stuff regarding business. And also just kind of their general, everybody's got to think the same way.
Yeah, I want to throw another aspect in. The night you and I did the sheriff's forum back in 2015, I think it was, I introduced you to Lori Phillips. You might have known her. Very political Democrat Party leader. Good friend of mine. My daughter-in-law used to be her receptionist at her law firm. But I asked her, 2016, a lot of seats in Oklahoma County went Democrat in the legislature. And I said, wow, what happened? And she said, oh, it's the Bernie people. They stayed organized over there. Not so much in Tulsa, but her daughter, Tiffany, ran Bernie Sanders' campaign and won Oklahoma in 2016, the presidential primary. I think you've got a very different, very urban Democrat Party now.
Oh, yeah, right, sure.
Because as you know, it's all but dead in almost every other county other than the 2 state universities, big ones, and then the 2 metropolitan areas.
Right. Now
that's it.
Yeah, that's another way the parties have flipped. I mean, for decades, the Republicans were the urban party and the Democrats were the rural party. Well, so now, and of course, if you look at the statewide, I mean, basically, Kevin Stitt won the governor's election in rural Oklahoma. He lost Oklahoma County. He kind of split in Tulsa County, and he got. So I think I'm trying to remember. I think he got like 54%. The 2018 governor's election is extremely interesting, just because he had this huge turnout. There was a lot of turmoil going on in the state. And so I felt like both candidates and their campaigns did a good job, because Drew Edmondson actually got more votes than than 3 or 4 people who've actually been elected governor. He got a lot of votes, but Kevin Stitt got a whole lot more votes, and so, and I say the campaigns, maybe it was just the people, but that was just a really interesting campaign. And of course, with Kevin Stitt, you got a guy that nobody started out. I don't think one person out of 100 could have told you who he was.
Hey, let's go more national. Some other interesting things. The Donald Trump effect. You've got Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania. I don't know if you follow that at all.
Oh, some, but I mean, I know that Trump endorsed him, which is a little surprising to me.
And the other one, okay, let me ask you that. Why do you feel that is surprising?
I don't know. I just thought that he was, I can't think of the other, there's another candidate in that I thought.
Yeah, is it McCormick?
I thought he was more, I mean, Oz is kind of a late comer, to the whole thing. And I thought McCormick or whatever, was, kind of been with him all along.
Well, he wasn't real because I looked into. I've been watching it a little longer, and he's a Wall Street guy. McCormick,
okay.
yeah,
Right,
and
okay.
he's a big Wall Street guy, and he was not really a Trump guy early on. He was more of none of them are never Trumpers, but he hasn't always been a Trump. Let's put it as he was a David Van Trumper at one point, and but. I want to make 2 points here. There's that one, that Dr. Oz and McCormick race there in Pennsylvania. And then there's the J.D. Vance. Also, just yesterday, Trump has come out for J.D. Vance.
You got a lot of blowback on that.
Right. Now, it's interesting because I was first introduced to J.D. Vance. My wife and I happened to just see the movie Hillbilly Elegy. Have you seen it?
I have not. No.
Have you seen it? It's worth watching. Glenn Close, by the way, for all of you, you need to see this film. It's basically J.D. Vance's film. It's a book he wrote before anybody knew who he was. It's a movie about his life as a little boy and his grandmother and his mother. His mother was bipolar, and his grandmother basically raised him. And Glenn Close, who I don't think she's bipolar, but she may have had a relative that was bipolar.
She has a sister.
Is it her sister? Yeah, I knew somebody was bipolar. But I'll tell you, I don't know if there's an actress on earth that is any better than Glenn Close, because when you see her, just the way she looks, it deserves an Academy Award.
Yep.
It's unbelievable. But anyway, it's the story of J.D. Vance. And when you see this, you just can't believe that this is the guy who ended up at Harvard. He's a Harvard grad coming out of the sticks somewhere, and how he ever came out of that is unbelievable. But anyway, and he was also not a Trump fan. He opposed Trump and said he would vote for Hillary Clinton, in fact, versus Trump. But it has turned around that he has been a real Trump supporter of late. So what do you think about this? Well, first of all, what do you think about Trump's endorsements? Do you really think they carry that much weight?
I think if you're a Republican, the one thing you don't want is for him to be against you. Now, whether his endorsements help you or not, I think probably depends on the constituency and the election. I mean, if it's in a primary, it's a little bit different than in a general election. It just seems like endorsements are a funny thing. People can have high regard for a political person, but they don't necessarily follow their endorsements. Yeah. Tom Coburn used to endorse people all the time. He didn't win. And
you remember though, when he was running for Senate, Jim Inhofe was pushing Kirk Humphreys, said Humphreys is the only Republican who can win.
I have to say Jim Inhofe has one of the worst records for
Absolutely.
So his guy,
he's horrible.
I mean, so he, at one point he was a Rick Perry guy for president.
Oh, yeah.
John Thune.
I do. I remember
Phil Graham.
About how good looking John Thune was. That was his endorsement.
Right. Fred Thompson.
Yeah.
Now he didn't. I don't think he necessarily endorsed Fred Thompson, but he thought Fred Thompson was going to win.
Yeah.
Because everybody had seen him on television.
Yeah.
And of course, Fred went nowhere.
Yeah.
So politicians. So I could be wrong, but my impression is that Trump is really carefully. I think his endorsements are not based so much on his assessment of the candidates' tendencies, whatever they're going to vote as. Well, I shouldn't say that. I think because he's not going to endorse, some Democrat over here. So it's got to be somebody that's somewhere in this range.
Well,
but he wants to endorse somebody who's going to win.
Okay, let's look at
so he's got good instincts.
Third District, Oklahoma.
You're right.
I heard he just endorsed Frank Lucas.
That is correct.
And I'm like, okay, Donald, are you draining the swamp? Or are you becoming part of it?
Well, I mean, so Frank Lucas has always been very popular in his district.
Yeah, that's your old stomping grounds.
Yeah, right. And I mean, I have wanted to, but I've never had the time to go back and look and see if any politician in Oklahoma history who's served as long as he has consistently won with the kind of majorities he has. I mean, I don't think Carl Albert had the kind of popular support that Frank Lucas has had. And so
yeah, he's got a tough challenger this time.
Well, I guess, but I mean, again, I don't know that anybody outside of, and of course I'm not an expert on, I don't know how well he's known. I'm not sure many people outside of Enid know who Wade Burleson is. They all know who Frank Lucas is.
But let's go back, 8 years. When James Lankford, a guy from the Oklahoma City district, I had no idea how important Falls Creek was.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, yeah. That's...
And, because it seemed like every Baptist church throughout Oklahoma was a campaign headquarters.
I knew he was going to win. I knew from the day that was...
I'm just telling you, and I've got friends who are Baptists that hate it when I refer to the Baptist Mafia. Yeah. But I'm telling you, you can't underestimate churches in rural Oklahoma. And
no, that's exactly right. I don't know, and I because I don't keep up with it, I don't know if Wade Burleson has the same connection that James Lankford. I mean, Lankford ran Falls Creek, and every Baptist kid and
and their parents and their parents.
This Tuesday night, Oak Pack has Bob Stoops coming to introduce and endorse Wade Burleson.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Well, Frank may have some competition there.
I'm just telling you, this is what I'm talking about. Donald Trump has to be careful here. I think you and I remember 2010, early on the governor's race, Randy Brogdon was leading. And then some ex-governor out of Arkansas, Sarah Palin, decided she was going to endorse Mary Fallon. And that changed everything, right?
Though, but see, the thing about it is Trump isn't 100%. He doesn't care. It doesn't matter if he wins all the time. It's just that he wins some of the time. And most of the time he does. He doesn't have to be right all the time.
Yeah, I'm just saying you don't want to tick off your base right now. Because you want to keep the Trump movement. If you're Trump, you want to keep your base unified.
Yeah, that may be true, but I don't think that one district in Oklahoma, if he were to lose that, is going to cause Oklahoma to reject him.
I'm more concerned what you said about J.D. Vance, because Josh Mandel is a solid guy. Actually, there's 3 solid candidates there.
Yeah, I am surprised at that just from the standpoint of that seems to be, and I haven't looked at it in a while, but that seems to be a competitive primary.
They're all over the place.
So did you see the fight that almost broke out in the debate? Did you see that?
Yeah, Josh Vance and another
No, it wasn't JD. No.
I mean, it was Josh Mandel, and he was
Vance was just sitting there, and that actually helped. Actually helped JD and the other candidates to have these two.
That reminds you remember '98 when Tim Harris was in 3rd place? And the husband of the TV anchor, I forget his name, and Chuck Richardson, and they got so negative that the guy in third place ended up becoming the DA. So there's wisdom in staying out of that negative stuff.
Yeah.
It hurts both.
Because JD was just sitting there going and looking at there was a lady, I think, next to him. They were just looking at each other going, what's going on here?
There are downsides to negative advertising. We've hardly found that out, you know?
Hey, let's move on to one other thing in the last few minutes. And this is a little different. We're going to get you in on this other stuff here, get you, just tap into all of that wisdom you have there, Randy.
Trouble.
I want to find out, Elon Musk, he's kind of soaked up a lot of it's so funny how, a couple of weeks ago I talked about this and it's coming more and more true, the redefinition of terms. And it seems to me like progressives and, particularly the Democrat Party is almost redefining the term democracy. If you ever hear them, they're really throwing out this word. They're using it a lot, the word democracy, a threat to our democracy. January 6th was a threat to them. They're trying to overthrow our democracy. This is democracy. And now the thing you're hearing is that Elon Musk taking over Twitter is a threat to our democracy. His attempt at free speech is a threat to our democracy, is kind of what's being implied here. In fact, it was even stated by somebody, which is crazy. What do you think of Elon Musk trying to buy or take over Twitter?
You know, I have to say I tend not to get too wrapped up in that stuff. But so here's my sort of general, but I'll tell you what I think to the extent this is just, I probably know just enough to be dangerous. But so Twitter is not a public facility. I mean, it's not like the airwaves for radio, which I guess hardly anybody listens to radio. But anyway, so it's a private enterprise, and so people buy and sell private enterprises all the time. And so if he winds up buying it, he winds up buying it. And if he does a bad job running it, it'll go out of business. I mean, that's kind of the way I think about it. On the other hand, I think people who get so worried about, well, they censor me on Facebook. I mean, somebody told me they got knocked off of Facebook the other day because they linked to a story we had about Felix Jones fixing up the Brady Mansion. Now, I don't know why that, and maybe it's because I probably mentioned the Ku Klux Klan or something in there. I don't know what the deal was, but all of these are private enterprises, and if they do a bad job, people are going to move on. Of course, the problem is that it takes a lot of money to, capital to do this. Mm-hmm. So to me, the real problem is not Facebook or Twitter. The problem is the access to capital to allow a diverse ownership and diverse enterprise. It just seems like it shouldn't be so difficult for somebody to go into competition. And I know there are competitors, and some of them may be growing. I know President Trump has recently launched one. I just, it's like newspapers. Newspapers. I love newspapers. I worked at them all my life, but they're businesses, and if they don't, if the times go against them, there's all sorts of things that it's not just a matter of the people who run the business. There's circumstances, economy changes. There's all sorts of things that go into whether, a whole lot better than I do, Eddie, and you too, David. But there's a whole lot of things that go into whether a business is a success. A guy can work his butt off and his business still fail. Mm-hmm. But we still ought to be able, I think, in this country, people ought to have access. They ought to have at least have the chance to try, mm-hmm. to fail or succeed. And so I'm concerned not just about, there's Facebook and there's Twitter and, and there's nothing else. I'm concerned, about, there's just a handful of companies that process and market beef. That's one of there's all sorts of, we've had a great consolidation of industry, and it's turned into almost a monopolistic kind of a deal with a lot of things. That's sort of the nature of the world, I guess. But anyway, I'm getting way too far away from what you asked me. I guess my answer is, I guess I don't care if Elon Musk takes over. I mean, Elon Musk is kind of a weird guy.
He is.
But is he any weirder than the guy that owns Twitter now? I don't know that he is.
Let me ask you this. I've been told by many people in your profession, media journalism, that Twitter's essential to journalists.
Well, it's helpful. I don't know if it's essential. To me, it's something that gets you in trouble. But
That's true.
I mean, but it can be helpful in the sense that a lot of people communicate with Twitter. You know, I mean, like they put out statements and stuff. Personally, you know, I look at Twitter a fair amount. I don't really use it that much. I mean, you know, we're supposed to tweet out our stories and all, so I do all of that. Yesterday, I used it to say Scott Pruitt is filing for office, and he was not saying what it is. And then a few minutes later saying, well, he filed for U.S. Senate. I don't do that often, but I think so.
Well, you had a big scoop there.
Well, there were about 3 or 4 of us there, but I got it out pretty quick, I would say. But so for a long time, I've said the internet giveth and the internet taketh away. Mm-hmm. So the internet in some ways has made our job a lot easier, and in some ways it's made it a lot harder. It's just, you know, it's like, you know, it used to take 3 days to get from Tulsa to Muskogee by horseback or whatever, and now you can do it in 45 minutes by car. So everything changes, and you have to adapt to that.
Yeah, and technology, I mean, look, Eddie worked for a big radio station, and what are we doing here on a shoestring budget? We're basically, because of internet technology.
Right.
You know, and social media, I mean, a blog, I mean, all these things. Our friend Russell Mills, you bloggers, you know, and I'm like, hey, Russell, I'm good to you. But guys like you in the professional media, to some degree, are kind of competing with the little guy blogger.
I think that's, and really who we're all competing with, frankly, I mean, we're all competing for time, right? Mm-hmm. And we're all competing for people's attention. Well, what's our biggest competition? Well, it's Minecraft. No, really.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right.
You know,
yeah.
I mean, or it's reruns of Friends, or you know, or Wheel of Fortune. People have all of these choices that they, you know, all these things to choose between. How
600 cable stations.
600 cable stations, of which you watch maybe 3.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, look, so, you know, I think you and I have talked about this. You know, when I was growing up, we all read, you know, in my area, we read the Daily Oklahoman, and we got 4 TV stations if you counted, OETA. And so, yeah, PBS. Mm-hmm. So now, you know, you can get any kind of news source you want, or you can just do no news and watch, or you can get it off of Facebook.
Get it on your phone.
You can, I mean, so there's all these, the markets have been, you know, so sliced into such narrow, niches, and we don't really have mass communications anymore. Yes.
Or it's mass.
Or it's mass. But
well, which brings me, which I think what I want to wrap up with this. Speaking of that, you work for what you would call traditional media, or the old school newspaper.
Yeah.
How do you see the future of print news?
Well, you know, so I think of myself as being in the information business. And, you know, newsprint is one medium. So is digital, but the basic product is information. Mm-hmm. Whether that's a news story or an advertisement, it's information. And so to directly answer your question, I don't know. I mean, I think to some extent there will always be a place for print media, but I don't, because it has, I mean.
Now, let me be clear. Let me, for an understanding. by print, do you mean ink on paper?
I mean ink on paper.
You actually talking about ink on paper?
I mean ink on paper.
Okay.
Because there are some things, I mean, some people just like to read that. You know, actually, for instance, the sale of books has not gone down. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm talking about printed books.
Right.
Printed books are still popular. So there's still some people in printed newspapers are still cheaper for the consumer. They're still cheaper because, yes, you can read it on that or a tablet, but you have to go and, you know, buy that device to read it on. So, but if you just want to read one newspaper, yes, they're a lot more expensive than they used to be, but they're cheaper than a device. Mm-hmm. And advertisers like them because you have that ad right there. It doesn't go away
and it lasts
after
for days.
Yeah.
It lays there.
It's there. And so, but it's not going to be obviously like it was. And I think by and large, the movement is going to be towards, well, some news operations are just actively pushing people to online because it's cheaper to produce. I mean, that's my feeling about it. And then I think the time will come when, if it hasn't already, that the large majority of news will be digital. It'll be digital.
Well, in fact, you have a subscription that's digital only.
Yeah.
For a lower price.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And so, you know, with a digital product, you don't have to buy ink. You don't have to buy paper. You don't have to have pressmen. You don't have to have a press.
Or put it in the car and deliver it to their home.
Or put it in the car. Now, I'll tell you, the Tulsa World press room stays very busy because we print, besides the Tulsa World, we print the Daily Oklahoman, we print the Wall Street, the New York Times.
Really?
We print Bartlesville. We print those 4 community newspapers that we own. Mm-hmm. So the presses at our place actually stay pretty busy.
Wow.
But they're just
does Warren Buffett still own?
No. The newspaper is owned by a company called Lee, and Lee started out as kind of small papers, but the biggest paper or the biggest news. We like to be called news organizations now. The biggest thing they own is the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and they've also got. I think it's Madison, Wisconsin, and Richmond, Virginia, and then a bunch of others. I forget. I think there's 77 altogether. That's from Little Shoppers up to the Post-Dispatch.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this on a personal level on what you do, and I said we close with this, but let me ask you, just you personally, what is your day like? What time do you get up to start writing in the morning?
Well, it kind of varies.
Or I guess because it'd be involved, you got to do research and investigating.
Yesterday ran to the Capitol.
Yeah. So yesterday was an unusual day, but it was long. I mean, I got up.
Your average. Let's just take an average.
So I got up at 5:00 yesterday morning to get to the Capitol by 8:00, and I was there until 8:30 at night, and then I drove back here and did some writing here.
But you had to do some reporting from the Capitol. Yeah,
although I tell you, I didn't do nearly as much I wrote the story there.
Right.
And tweeted.
It's funny at those filings.
You twit.
You don't really, so I thought, I'll be able to get some work done during the Friday at the Capitol because there's not going to be that many people come in. Well, I didn't because it was just, so during the filing, I spend a lot of time just talking to people and listening,
making contacts,
and,
right?
And listening to people. A big part, I would say, the biggest part of my job is listening to people, and that's why I tell everybody. It's kind of surprising in a way to me, I guess. But people seem hesitant to call you or send you emails. I want to hear from everybody because that's the only way I have to try and kind of keep halfway in touch with what's going on. I view my job as telling people what's going on in their town and to some extent explaining it to them. And when I say explain it to them, I don't mean well, you should be against this because. Tell them, okay, this is important because. And, there's different kinds of journalists and I kind of view myself as explanatory, just the guy at the back of the room taking notes. Mm-hmm. And
how many names are in your phone contact list?
I have no idea.
God, that's a lot.
Well, there are quite a few. And of course, I've been there 43 years now. So, but yeah, I try and listen to people, and I really encourage people to, send me stuff and tell me when they're, and not just when they want to tell me what a great job they think I'm doing. Actually, I appreciate that, but I also like to hear when they think, I've done something wrong.
Well, what set this up, I called you and said, hey, you left out a candidate in your story.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which was right. That's another, and one thing I would tell people is, not everything is a big conspiracy. When we screw up, it's usually we just screwed up.
Now, is there someone there that calls you at the paper, says, Randy, we need you to cover this, or do they ask you, would you like to cover it, or do you pick your own stories to cover?
So I have certain things that I'm responsible for, and I'm kind of self-directed, but I also have editors, and there might be something I don't know about, or I will talk to them and say, it's a little bit of a negotiating process. I'll say, okay, I've got this, and this. Which ones are you guys interested in? Or what sort of, I can't do them all, so what kind of priority do I put on them? Mm-hmm. And we talk about it. Now, every once in a while, they'll say, okay, we got something. Can you do this? Cause so-and-so is off doing this. And so I wind up, covering something that I wouldn't normally cover. I'm just kind of filling in. So I would say it's like I said, it's kind of a conversation type of a deal.
Do you have assistants that help you with stories?
No.
It's just you.
It's just me.
When it says Randy Krehbiel, it's
Those
Randy
Krehbiel. Those were the good days.
We used to have some research assistants, although to be honest, I tried to do as much of my own research as I could, because lots of times in doing research, you'll stumble across things. I did a lot of work on the Tulsa race riot, the race massacre, over a period of 20 years, and I tried to do almost all my own research, because I would find things that in places I wouldn't expect to find them that were very illuminating when I was working on it. I wasn't just trying to get facts about that specific event. I was trying to understand the context, the entire setting. So you come across stuff that wasn't, that if you tell somebody, I want you to go out and find everything you can about this, well, they would be looking for that particular thing. Now, the downside of that is that you start looking over here, and next thing you know, you've spent 3 hours on stuff.
I resemble that.
Chasing rabbits. That's what I like to do. Yeah, well, Randy, listen, thank you, and I am very much looking forward to after the primary and having you again, and then maybe we can take care of that real quick. We know who won, and then we can discuss who's going to win the real election. But I would like to dig more into some of the other stuff, because
sure.
One of the things we can talk about probably at that time too will be the outcome of the big police murder trial that is coming up. That's coming up here in another week. Anyway, Randy, thank you so much for taking time with us, and we will see you all next week, people, and have a great week. Happy Easter to everyone. He is risen. He is risen indeed.